Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in a public meeting, in a meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may see instructions on the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. The meeting is being recorded. I'm just going to ask Joseph Method to join us too. And the first order of business annually after the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st is a reorganization vote. This is required for us to have a discussion and a vote to elect our officers. I want to make a little bit of a introduction first, and then perhaps we could have a discussion. We have a bylaw that created the Affordable Housing Trust. We don't have policies or procedures or any kind of administrative guidelines. And I think that's something we might want to talk about further on. Since we began, we've had only two officers, a chair and a vice chair, and that's worked pretty well. We don't have a need for a recording secretary or a treasurer because at this point. I made a proposal that I think reflects the way that we've been operating in the last year. I'm suggesting that instead of having a chair and a vice chair, that we have two co-chairs and no vice chair. And the reason for this is I feel like Ananda Timpain has been operating above her station, if you will. I don't mean to say that. Has been operating as a de facto chair for the last year. I'm sorry?
I was making a joke. I was saying, are you trying to put me in my place before it's too late?
Yes. My point is that Ananda has some talents that I don't have, some interests in the financial parts of the project, and has done an outstanding amount of work to organize that aspect of our trust. And I am incredibly grateful, and we're very pleased to have somebody of Ananda's talents. Not that everybody else doesn't have their own talents too, but her talents have shined. My proposal is that having no constitution, having no defined roles, that we modify, instead of having a chair and a co-chair, that we have a chair and a vice chair, that we have two co-chairs.
Would you like a motion in that regard?
May I make a comment? That I think that this is a generous point, and it follows what President Biden just did in recognizing others' abilities, and I think it's terrific.
It must be because I'm getting senile. That's it. I'm sure you.
No. That wasn't the point of my comment. I swear. Mostly.
Sure. Let's put a motion on the table. Then we can have a little bit of discussion about it.
All right.
And I can tell you what I think.
I'll move to make Fred and Ananda co-chairs of the Housing Trust.
I will second that.
Wait. I think we need, well, I would suggest two separate motions. One, that we create the position of co-chairs, and then separate votes to make to fill those positions. And I think that means 3 votes. Sorry.
Okay, I'll take back my original motion and move that we create a position of co-chair of the Housing Trust.
I second that.
Any discussion? I will say that the point of this is I'm very comfortable keeping the administrative. By the way, I've talked to Chris Rembold and I talked to Bill Cook about this, and they both thought this was a good idea. And Chris is joining us on the side here too now, a little later. The point of this is I would like to stay as co-chair, handling the North Plain Road project, development projects, and doing the bulk of the administrative work, creating the agenda, chasing down minutes, things like that. Ananda would, under this scenario, would continue to do her excellent work for finance, take the lead point on talking to the community preservation, and basically and we would rotate leading the meetings. So do we have any other discussion? Hearing none. This is
Amanda
a
tried to
roll-
say something, but she was muted, I think. Unless
Ananda.
she's speaking to herself.
Yeah. I was just saying that like if we have further discussion, let's just discuss the vote we're having, which is about creating the co-chair before we move on to who. But
Yes. I think that we're stronger at having co-chairs rather than a chair and a vice chair.
I would suggest we're ready to vote if Joe
We are
doesn't.
ready to vote.
Thing
So
anymore.
Ananda, why don't you lead off the voting?
Aye.
Peter Most,
Aye.
Bill Cook,
Aye.
Joseph Method.
Aye.
The motion passes. Do we have nominations? We need to fill 2 slots. Yeah, 2 slots for co-chair.
I nominate Ananda.
Thank-
Ananda,
I accept.
good.
I'll nominate Fred.
Okay, I think we can have 1 vote. What do you think? We have 2 spots.
I mean, I think we would ask first, are there any other nominees?
Are there any other nominees? Is there any discussion? Hearing none. We're going to start with the way it's on my screen. Peter Most, this is Fred and Ananda to become co-chairs.
Aye.
Ananda Timpang,
Aye.
Bill Cook,
Aye.
Joseph Method.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Annual business to get out of the way. Next on the agenda is meeting minutes. I received the meeting minutes about an hour ago. I can share them with you if you like, but I have not actually even opened them. So we'll pass over those. We are up to date through May. These are the meeting minutes for the June meeting.
There's going to be a meeting of the CPC in August, I think. So if we can at least put the draft up on the website for June.
We can do that.
And a reminder to our, to Chris and the note taker that it's really important that we have them in advance so that we can vote on them in meetings.
Okay, I'm making notes.
Ananda, who is Chris? Oh, Chris Rembold?
Yep.
He's
And
not
that-
responsible. He's not responsible for who's responsible? Who prepares the minutes?
We have an administrative person who answers to Chris, who is paid to prepare the minutes. So yes, Chris, Chris is very much involved in this process. And
I think Peter's question was more, is Chris having to take the minutes? And no.
Yeah, I didn't know how this worked.
Yeah. most town boards have somebody assigned to do the minutes, and the staff are coordinating that.
I see. Thank you.
And they are paid.
Speak of the devil.
Yes, I've asked Chris to join us tonight. As you may recall, at our last meeting, you asked for 2 letters, one to be addressed to the town manager and assistant town manager, one regarding the status of North Plain Road and the status of the bid. The second one having to do with our expressing our urgency that the town council or request the town council review the ADU pilot program that they've had for some months. First on our agenda is North Plain Road, which Habitat has informed us will become Prosperity Way, a name that was picked out by the prospective new tenants or owners in the process. Before we get Chris to speak, and I'd like him to talk about some of the issues here, and he's generously joined us. I just want to recall that the issue had to do with the bid for infrastructure for sewer, water, electric, and roads taking longer than it might have, and expressing our frustration and that of Habitats for going a little longer than it might have been. And so Chris has generously agreed to come and give us an update on that, and we have a couple other things. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or would you like to? Can you give us an update?
Sure. Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, as Fred indicated, the bids, invitation for bids for the construction work to build what will be called Prosperity Way, the roads, the infrastructure, etc. This is to be paid by the MassWorks grant. The bid was a long time taking shape for a number of reasons, including, not limited to, the back and forth in the design process during the special permit and subdivision permitting process in the select board and the planning board, but also, and this, the really difficult part was putting together the specifications for the sewer. As the town's pressure sewer system designs were being changed, and our engineer had to sort of incorporate those. Then we dialed them back because the design would have been way too expensive. So we dialed it back to a system that won't be maintained by the town. It will merely hook into the town system. That, plus a very long time getting National Grid to respond in terms of how big of pads they needed for electrical transformers and conduits to serve the homes. So it was ridiculously long process to get all of the details back and incorporate them into the bid. So White Engineering has said that the bids will be open on August 2nd. After all of these delays, they do have a number of interested parties, folks who have taken out, as we say, taken out the bid book, the invitation for bids. So I'm excited about that and hoping that the bids come in favorably on the 2nd. And we'll let you know as soon as we have some draft results from that bid opening. We are indicating for folks who may be successful in winning the contract that all work should be substantially complete by the end of May 2025. We have plenty of time under the grant to complete the work, but we do want to go as fast as we can so that Habitat can start building homes in the area. So that is my brief update on North Plain Road.
2 questions, Chris. Can you walk us through, once you have the bids, what's the process from there? And then, one of the things we are wanting to think about is at what point we want to have down payment loans available for the project. So just timeline wise, do you have any sense of how the Habitat interlocks with this process?
Before you answer, let me just mention that Aaron O'Brien from Habitat is also on the call, so that
Great.
and may be able to help us on some of those things.
Sure. In terms of the process, so bids are received at town hall in sealed envelopes, and then we basically read who has bid and what their total price is. Then the engineer, along with town staff, will go through the bids line by line and ensure that they are responsive to each and every item, and that each and every item is thoughtfully priced and consistent and accurate. And assuming we have a bid that we can that we think is accurate and responsible and responsive, and it's a price we can afford, then we can award the bid, usually to the lowest bid, but as we say, the lowest responsible bidder. Ultimately, that decision is the town manager's, and then a contract can be entered into between the town and the contractor.
Excellent. That's what I wanted the group to be able, the trust to be able to hear, that the procurement is going to lie with the staff process.
Yep. That process from bid opening to contract is usually, I don't know, 30 days in a good month. Depends how many details need to be ironed out.
Do you know how many bids we have actually received?
They're not received yet. They're due on the 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Chris, this is Fred. Do we have contingencies built in so that we can award this project?
What do you mean by contingencies?
I'm more familiar with the New York State contracting law than the Mass contracting law. But if all of the bids come in above the available funds, do we have a mechanism for awarding a partial or what is our course of action then?
I'll have to check with the engineer on that to see what the bid form is like. We didn't structure it as, for example, you can build the road, but not the sewer. That's something that we would call a base bid plus an alternate.
Right.
We didn't structure it that way. It's structured more or less as an all-in. So I'm not sure if there's a way to split it and award just the road, but not the streetlight. You know, if that's what you're getting at.
It is what I'm getting at.
I'll talk to the engineer a little bit about that. Hopefully we won't need to go down that road. The second question was Habitat schedule. I can't speak for Habitat in terms of when they would look to work with applicants to actually close on the homes. Probably, I'm speculating, probably not until the homes are built, but I don't know. I'll talk with Aaron about that.
Aaron, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I usually we can begin the process as the homes are being completed, but as far as distributing the money, you're correct. The closing wouldn't be until the home is completed. So
we're likely looking that like the earliest we could see closings would be in FY26.
After July 1st of 25.
Yeah, that would be fiscal year 26, which is fine.
So I recall from the
it will help inform our CPC application process.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what funds you may have available now, you may want to work with Habitat to see if it's useful to soft commit any of those to
yes.
home.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I recall from previous discussions that we built in with the engineer, or Habitat built in with the engineer, some overlap so that it doesn't have to be a completely linear process. That is, the first construction contract doesn't have to be complete before Habitat shows up and starts building the houses. In fact,
Correct.
I believe we structured it so that this contract for infrastructure would include several foundations as part of the project. So that the idea is, while they're working on the south part of the project, Habitat could be beginning to build their houses on the north edge of the project, say, maybe the east and the west, sort of, there may be some
Yep.
overlap. In other words, Habitat can get going without having to wait for all of the roads to be 100% accepted.
Correct. That's what we understood as well.
Yeah, this is Chris, that's what we're hoping for, and that if we have a good contractor and an excellent on-site project management team, that could happen. That'd be great.
I want to share the construction sign if I have it here. This one share. Oh, it's not. Can you see that screen?
mm-hmm. Yep.
This is a draft. It's not final yet, but it would be a construction sign for the site that basically would be like a banner that would be attached to a construction fence, say. So long and linear. So,
Fred, you said that the future owners chose Prosperity Way as the name of the street. Does that mean that we already know who's going to be living there?
I think I'm going to defer to Erin and ask her to comment on that.
We have several people in the pipeline that have completed their financial education and completed they have pre-approvals on the mortgages from the banks and stuff. So we have several people that are in the process of becoming homeowners. Several families. So
and,
yes, we have people identified.
and are you structuring it as a lottery in phases, since the houses are going in phases?
Yes.
It would be nice for us to have some periodic updates so that we can track like where the applicants are coming from. And it's been a concern of mine to make sure that outreach is getting into all of South County. And I know that it has to be by lottery, and that's great, but I'd love to be able to have some regular updates as you're gathering your pool of applicants for each lottery.
Okay.
And maybe, I believe there was some talk about both an outreach event, possibly, as we fix the date. I think, everyone was hesitant to do it when the dates weren't at a point where we could answer that question.
Right.
And the second thing that Habitat talked to me about was organizing a volunteer event, so that not only are these houses built with sweat equity from the future owners, but it becomes a community effort, a community project of volunteers who step up and help.
Yeah, the families that have that are in the pipeline about every month reach out to me for updates, and so we can get started once we have some solid information on the schedule and what's happening.
Well, we really appreciate Habitat sticking in there on the project. I know it's, it's been a long time, and I'm sure that the families are frustrated. I'm sure the neighbors are wondering. We are doing as best we can, but it's I think it's been a learning curve for a lot of people, how long this process actually takes to evolve. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for on the North Plain Road Prosperity Way for either Chris Rembold or for Aaron O'Brien from Habitat?
No, just if we could maybe for our next meeting, if we could have a quick summary of the the geography that the current applicants are from, and then we'll set up the next time we'll have a when, like, maybe you could also let us know when you think you'll be doing outreach for your next lottery.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
Chris, if you're still there, if you could segue into giving us an update on the council review for the ADU pilot project.
The town manager and I have reached out to council. It's on what is a very long list of legal items, so I don't have any progress to report.
Chris, would you explain to us how the town's relationship with town council works? That is, there's a retainer agreement, is that right?
I think you're muted, Peter. I can't hear you.
No, I can hear Peter.
I can repeat the question if you would like.
Chris, can you hear me, Chris? No? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Peter. I think Chris doesn't seem to be able to hear us right now.
I guess I lagged. I just heard what Amanda said.
Okay.
So, Chris, my question was, would you help us understand the relationship, the retainer agreement between the town and the law firm? That is, when there's a question that's to be determined, is it how does one make sure that that issue gets reviewed promptly?
Well, the town manager and I work directly with our town council, which is one attorney from the firm KP Law. We do not, in a sense, have the entire firm on retainer. I'm not sure the details of how that works. Not really prepared to speak about that.
But so is it the town or the law firm that prioritizes questions to be reviewed and how promptly they will be reviewed? And I ask that because I'm new to being on this trust, but I understand the question regarding the review of the ADU pilot program has been pending for quite some time. As a lawyer, I can tell you that when a client wants something reviewed, it will get reviewed promptly unless there's some other issue going on. So I'm having trouble understanding why something should be lagging for such a long time.
Yeah, it's really the town manager and town council work together to identify the priorities.
Okay. So what will it take for us to get you?
There have been a number of lawsuits and other things that have consumed vast amounts of time and budget. So this has certainly taken a backseat in the line of priorities.
From what we understand, this is a relatively easy question that's been pending for quite some time. What would it take for you and the town manager to request that this issue get moved to near to the top of the pile rather than sitting at the bottom of the pile?
Yeah, we'll do our best to do that, Peter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Chris, I do think it's not a large task from the last time you and I communicated about it, and everything else is very, we can't move forward without it, but once we can move forward, we can put projects directly into the community, so.
Thank you both.
If you could stay for just a minute, please.
Sure.
First off, are there any other questions on that issue? Hearing none. I'm going to move one thing up just because Chris is with us and see if I can make it bigger for you guys. This is a rough summary of the income from the community impact fees for short-term rentals. As you may recall, in the short-term rental bylaw that was passed by town meeting went into effect in fiscal year 23, and the first period that any income came in was the second quarter of fiscal 23, which would have been October to December of 2022. Also, town meeting at the time that it passed was near unanimous in saying that the proceeds for the community impact fee, that it's the desire of town meeting, but the community impact fees be given to the Affordable Housing Trust to be used for programs. However, my understanding is that that is not an automatic filling up of the checkbook, that the money has to, while it's the will of town meeting, the money has to actually be transferred at a future town meeting.
It has to be appropriated.
Appropriate.
Yeah, so it's a bummer. We could have appropriated funds in May, but that wasn't on anybody's radar. So we won't be able to access these funds till the fiscal year 2026, also known as July 1, 2025. And Chris has let me know that it's on his radar to make sure that gets onto the town warrant for May 2025. And that will take care of appropriating those funds. So the good news is we have these funds out there, as long as the town votes to appropriate them. The less than good news is they are not accessible to us in this fiscal year, which is a very slim fiscal year for us.
Would it be a good idea to try to, in addition to the appropriation, try to get like a bylaw change to have it automatically redirected?
I would defer to Chris on that.
Hello, Christina. I see you here.
This is Chris. I'll just answer that question from Joseph. And no, it's not legally possible. The funds come in and they have to be appropriated every year by the voters.
Okay.
By town.
Even if there was a bylaw change?
I don't think it's a bylaw issue. I think it's a state law issue.
Okay.
Christina, you wanted to say something?
I was just clarifying that the actual town has to vote for us to appropriate that money.
That's right.
Correct.
So the vote that occurred that set this money up, that identified this money in this way, was an advisory vote by the town, and then pretty much all money that is going to be spent has to be appropriated at the town.
So I wanted to share
this.
Restricted
purpose.
I wanted to share this to give you an idea that we've been talking for a couple of years about alternate funding sources, and we weren't sure what the quantity or the magnitude of this source might be. But here you can see that it's stabilized somewhat at a regular kind of I'll say $8,000 roughly per quarter. So I think we can reasonably expect this going forward.
Can I ask a question? I don't really actually understand why they are not all months, but is it every other month that is collected?
No, every 3 months.
It's, yeah, it's quarterly.
Mhm.
So it's quarterly, and the first, the September quarter, they weren't collected yet.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Chris, just for clarification, the, it will be the funds that we were just looking at that can be appropriated in May. There won't be an additional year at that point.
I don't know that answer for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
It might be able, if you do it at a May annual town meeting, you might be able to include all funds through the end of FY25. It might be estimation. I'm not sure. If
All right.
there's any reason for a special town meeting between now and May, this item could be taken up then, and whatever funds are received by the town could be appropriated at that time.
Okay, great.
Chris,
but
can I
they
ask a
don't
question?
have to fall to
Chris,
free cash, should be transferred at that point.
Yeah.
Chris, can I ask a question? I have heard that there's a group that intends on having a special town meeting. That being the case, how would one get this issue on that article or agenda? Is nobody hearing me?
No, I can. I'll answer a little bit, and maybe Chris will come. Oh, Chris
Some
is,
reason I doesn't like listening to Peter. I'm sorry, it froze again.
Chris, the question is, should there be a town meeting? A special town meeting? What do we need to know about the process to have this, to have these funds appropriated at that town meeting?
Well, the ultimately the select board would put together the warrant. So if there's to be a town meeting, we could request that this be put on the warrant.
So we'd want the trust to make the request of the select board.
I mean, the town manager and I could help carry that water.
Great.
All right. The next item on the agenda is fiscal report.
Yeah.
Do
So,
you-
yeah, I've got it. So there are really no changes to what we looked at through June. So that closes out last fiscal year. Can show you that briefly. You can see the grant there was no expenses under the grant, so it doesn't show up as income or expenses. The MassWorks grant is what I'm referring to for those of you who don't have grants on your mind. And Chris did add in the town sources document a line to reflect that we voted to set aside funds for the ADU pilot. He's marked it in green because we haven't actually dispersed them. So that's a bit of we'll hold that in parentheses. It's so that's that fiscal year. And I guess we're having the budget conversation later. So, or next, is that next, Fred? I can't see the agenda with my screen open like this.
We are segueing directly into a budget discussion to continue the budget discussion. So
does anybody have any questions about the fiscal year we're just closing out? The next thing that will happen with this is Chris and I are going to touch base tomorrow. We are going to update they're going to update the summary report for the CPC. This is April's, and then we'll send them an end of year report. I think some of what's going to be important for us to explain to CPC is why the ADU pilot is on hold. Historically, they have not wanted to fund us when we have money that we plan to spend and haven't spent. And And then also our strategy in terms of in the spring, consciously choosing not to advertise the open RFP because we saw it as advantageous to roll what we had, the balance we had left into this fiscal year, since we only had the 23,000 from the CPA funds.
And Ananda, is the only reason the pilot program hasn't proceeded is that we're waiting on town council review for such a long time, or is there some other reason?
It is technically because we're waiting for town council review. Once town council review happens, there'll still be a little bit more work before it's live, but we can't finalize the contract with Construct or put out the Construct can't put out the call for proposals until we have the language from town council. So it won't be, once we get a green light from town council with any changes, it won't be immediate that it goes live, but at that point we can finalize the contract and Construct can actually do what they need to do to open the applications. Anything else on this fiscal year? I'll switch to the document we started drafting for next, if that's good for folks. This is what I've been doing today, showing people spreadsheets of budgets all day.
Did you study things like this in school?
No, I learned this as a student activist of all things. Somebody told us we couldn't have student government money unless we learned how to do a budget. So I learned how to do a budget.
Good for you.
So this is where we left things off last meeting.
So the important number here is the subtotal in the budgeted amount column of how much is available for us. Is that, or would you say, in other words, 179,946.96?
You're looking at this cell?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at that cell, yes.
Yes.
Is that the money that we?
That's the total money as of July 1st that we have available for the program areas that we run. And then this is in the expenditures, this is how we loosely discussed in the last meeting, allocating them, which leaves us with 20,000 to still move around. And it lets us it would, allow us to make 2 down payment loans.
And the ADU money is not, it's just.
It's technically not showing on this budget because it's showing on the previous budget. And I'll probably talk with Chris a little bit tomorrow and we'll land on how we want to handle that. Just visually for all of us, but we know that the money's been voted on to be used in that way. And it exists.
I mean, the thing about this budget that has to make it more, I'll say dynamic, but flexible, is we can't control the people that will come to us for down payment loans. It could be 1, it could be none, it could be 5. So, I think it's great to have a placeholder, an aspirational goal of how to spend our money so that we understand that. But life happens and, things could be different.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's that it's using this as a tool for the trust as a body to be on the same page about our intentions. And then when something does change, that we use this as a tool to have it be the trust as a body making that decision for change. So to me, it's it aids our governance and transparency. So my thought is, like, I'm comfortable moving forward with these allocations. And I think that puts us in a position to start looking into moving forward on any property acquisition we may be considering. And maybe when we meet next would be time for another closed session so that we could have those discussions. Would that be okay with you, Chris?
I think you're muted.
No, he can't hear you either.
That's okay.
It's
I'll talk with
contagious.
Chris. Oh, there he is. I'll talk with Chris tomorrow about that, but yeah,
So
that's what I can say in an open session.
the emergency rental assistance, that's still available, or we waiting for their requests or what? Yeah.
So the last invoice we received was in
End of
March.
End of March.
And showed funds still available. Last time we met, Fred, you thought we should be expecting another invoice soon. I think it would be wise for us to follow up because, as you remember, Christina, there was a period of time where they thought they had expended all of their funds, and it was when we asked them to look more closely that they've realized they had not. So I think that is a good question. The amount we budgeted here assumes that when they have spent down the funds that we had given to Construct to distribute, that they would come back with another request. Slash, we would invite them to come back with another request because we see value in this.
Well, we would also do a vote, a proposal and a vote before that money is automatically provided.
Yeah.
But it's a reasonable amount for going forward, given that they have some continuing funds from a previous allocation that we've made to them.
But we definitely are not seeing we're not seeing the housing crisis lesson, and we're not seeing the housing insecurity lesson. And so I do think it's wise for us to continue to prioritize that as a preventative measure.
Remember, this money has to get us 11 months now till next July 1st before we have any additional funds. So what you're looking at is an annual budget. And when you're talking about housing and real estate and helping out, it's not a lot of money. It doesn't go very far. But, I think we've agreed on a very reasonable allocation.
And ultimately, like, it doesn't lessen the impact if the requests for down payment loan program come in September and all of that money goes out in September, or if they come in May. So this is, in that sense, I don't think that we have an obligation to stretch this over the year. It's more that we just won't have more funds until the next fiscal year. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this budget as our guiding budget for financial decisions for the coming fiscal year.
I'll second.
Fred, do you want to ask for discussion?
No, you're perfectly capable. You've got the authority now. Yes, any discussion on the motion to accept this as the budget for fiscal 26, which is the fiscal year we're in right now?
No, this is FY 25.
25.
25, sorry.
That's okay.
I got ahead of myself. I think we all pretty much understand it. I don't see anybody wants to make a motion. So there's a motion on the table to accept this budget, basically column level C, as our guidance for this year. I'll just point out that it is only a guidance. It isn't an obligation that we spend money in this way. Roll call vote. Peter Most, you're first on my screen.
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Bill Cook,
Aye.
Ananda,
Aye.
and Joseph Method,
Aye.
and Fred Clark, aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Ananda, have you started thinking at all about the CPA application, which basically would be then fiscal 26's,
Yes.
driven by fiscal 26's budget, or the other way around, fiscal 26's budget would be driven by
Yeah.
would drive the CPA application.
Peter, to just catch you up, the last year we shifted what we were proposing to the CPC to basically make a case and ask the town to start a conversation about having the trust manage all of the allocated funds for housing rather than the CPC directly funding housing, like specific development projects. I viewed it as the beginning of a conversation that was important to have. It was not a surprise to me that it was not the direction the CPC went. But it did start the conversation. And I think that in part, it contributed to, if wasn't the main driving force behind the CPC spending the maximum allowable percentage of CPA funds on housing, even if they didn't allocate it to the trust. They actually allocated to the trust last after all of the projects they funded. And there were two main issues that I heard in the room for the CPC. One was concern about our ability to conduct oversight as a body. And that was in part fueled by the minutes were not being completed and posted, which is an issue that has since been corrected, but is why you will hear me say we really, really have to have them at the start of every meeting to vote on. And also some I think confusion about reporting. That the CPC's perception was reporting had not happened. Chris and Fred had shared information with CPC, but we just focused on pulling out of that. So Fred and I went before the CPC in April and walked them through the first 3 quarters of our year and provided a good overview, simple overview, but also all of the detailed backup documents for the people on that commission or committee that are very detail oriented. And then the second issue is really just people are having trouble wrapping their head around how would it work. It doesn't, it doesn't make sense to have 2 bodies that can give that can or are giving funding to developers. At that time, the South Berkshire Community Development Corporation had a proposal before both of our bodies, both the trust and them. That was frustrating and confusing. But when we met with them in April, Fred and I had a couple of examples that really illustrated the value of having the funds in the trust. And so as I see it, there are two main benefits to having the town shift CPA funds to the trust for housing rather than having CPC to distribute them. And one is just that we can distribute them throughout the year, so we can be responsive month to month once they're allocated to us. And the CPC really can't do that. They have to have a single process at one time in the year, and then that has to feed into the town meeting for a vote on allocation. And so we had an example of a proposal coming to us for, was it the marble block originally?
Sumner block.
Sumner block.
Originally the marble block, and then they
Yeah, so
transferred.
it originally came to us for the marble block. As they got a little bit further into the process of purchasing and moving forward with that project, it became clear that it wasn't viable for the budget they had, and they were able to come back to us very quickly, and we could pivot that money into the marble block or the Sumner block, whichever block it ended up with. And that wouldn't have been possible in the way that the CPC has to function. And then the other is that the trust has a specific power, and this is where I always make you talk, Bill, because is it 30B? Procurement?
Yes. We can
Yeah.
avoid having to, issue an RFP every time we go to do something with money. To buy land.
Yeah, so we can purchase properties without going through the long procurement process.
Exactly. And not just land, but, a foreclosure or something like that. Anything that we buy, we don't have to issue an RFP. And
yeah. So that is a big asset that we have. So my thought is that I'd like to see us basically go back with the same framework to them this year, that we're starting at, like, again, we're asking you to allocate, we're still in a housing crisis. This is the main vehicle for funding, doing something about it that the town has. And again, urging them to max out the allowable percentage to spend, which it's basically 10% per category less admin. So we end up close to 75, 80%. To max out that amount of spending on housing, that I think we can take the structure of the proposal and strengthen it. I'd like to work with the grant writer that I worked with on the report, and then that we as a body take the time to tweak it, so like we can plan out. It doesn't sound like we need to worry about not having down payment assistance for the North Plain Road site in this fiscal year, but we should be planning for the number of houses we think will be transferring in FY26 in this application. And members of the CPC were particularly interested in that. We have really good data on the emergency rental assistance coming to us now, and Jane at Construct is interested in working more closely on how we go before the CPC together, because ultimately Jane sees it as in the larger interest of the housing needs to have the funds at the trust. She doesn't need them to come directly to her if they're accessible throughout the year. And so that's my thought on how we approach it, and I hand it off to you all for further discussion and thoughts.
That sounds right. That sounds like the way to go.
Yeah.
I think I didn't hear just the idea that like there might be some like amazing plot of land we want to buy.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what we said last year was like the same categories of activities that we see in the budget is how we structured the proposal. And so we'd be saying like, that we want the max allocation, and here's how we would allocate it within our operating, and it would be across all of those categories. So it would, you know, if they decided to do that, it would allow us to revive the updated RFP available to developers. And it would also allow us to do property acquisition.
I think it helps. I don't know if we framed it exactly this way, but I do think that it's useful just to say that no matter what, we as a position, we believe that they should try to max out affordable housing. You know, and say like, and we'd like to have it, but overall, just say like the message is that we think that they should max out affordable housing.
And then I'd see like, I guess a question that we should kind of talk through is, Bill and Christina, where do you see the work that you all have been doing on like the small plot co-developed small dwellings? Like, should we be proposing that for 2026? I know that there's some zoning issues.
Not so much zoning issues as banking issues at the moment. I've just asked Peter to take a look at a sort of land trust model that I've gotten from Habitat and see if he could make it work for what we want to do with the purchasing the land. And we're trying to figure out if the people that are doing the small houses on a lot, if the land can be really held separate and still have them get a construction loan and all of that. So it's a little hung up at the moment.
So would it be reasonable to think that for the fiscal year 2026, we probably would at best be looking at purchasing the land anyway, like expense-wise, that we wouldn't be looking at other expenses beyond that. So if we're allowing for acquisition within
That's
our,
right.
if we're putting acquisition funds in our budget, we don't have to have the details of this worked out.
Right.
And I'd just like to point out that the assignment that Bill gave to council only came this morning, so there's been no delay here. It's not under the bottom of the pile, just to be
You're not done yet?
What about the?
I'll write a firmly worded letter when we think it is.
Please.
What about accessing the abandoned, I don't know how you phrase that, abandoned housing that might be available because it's owned by town, but it's not.
That the survey that Fred's been talking about?
I've been talking about it, but I haven't done anything about it. As far as I know, there aren't, it takes a very long time for the town to take possession of property through tax title delinquency. As far as I know, there are no projects like that are in the works. There are some other mechanisms that, rather than having the town take possession of them, such as this program that Construct and Habitat have done through the Attorney General's office called receivership. And that's a very successful program with a much shorter time frame.
What does it mean?
It means that they come in as a designated developer. They work with the owner of the property. They have access to some funds. They are able to take the property and address the building code violations and the other energy and livability issues, and bring the property back to a high level of livability.
And
But still being owned by the original owner.
I believe that's the intention, although it doesn't always work that way. I mean, I'm not sure that it always goes back to the original owner. I don't know all the complete details there. It's a different program, and it takes a specific kind of a house and ownership to fit into it. All of these programs in Massachusetts are take a long time. They have a long lead period to get there. What we were talking about, and I confess I haven't done anything about it, and I left it off the agenda, was compiling information and data to then only then look for a way to help get that house. This may mean that we don't have any actual involvement in terms of ownership or financial involvement, but serve simply as a catalyst, conduit, if you will, to connect the project. We would be the provider of the information at that point.
Who has that information?
Who has it?
Yeah, like if we,
Well, it's in a variety of different sources. Some of it doesn't exist until you dig it out. Some of it is at the Board of Health, if there's health code violations, the building inspector, if there are building code violations, the assessor, if there's tax delinquencies.
So Fred, all right, Chris,
Oh, Chris,
go ahead.
Chris wants to correct all the wrong things I just said.
No, not at all. I just wanted to let the trust know there was a recent foreclosure on a single family, I believe it's a single family home that the town now owns, and I believe the owner has not redeemed it. So the town has control of it. So very recent, and we'll work through the process. It seems like a good candidate for the model that the trust followed with 40 Grove Street, which was putting it out for a developer to rehab it and sell it to a income qualifying household. So hopefully by your next meeting, I'll have a little bit more information about that. Is there anything else I can clarify?
Are there houses that are delinquent, have building code violations, but may have their tax and sewer bills paid up to date?
There may be. That's not a program that we've been able to prioritize. I mean, I know in my head there are properties that
I know a couple.
meet that definition, but we have not advanced it through the Attorney General's office or land court towards a receivership program yet.
So
It's
Fred,
going to
what you
be, I want to
suggested,
take this on and work on it, but I want to do it after Labor Day. So
well, that's fine, but I just want to understand. Fred, you're suggesting that the role the trust could play would be to fill the gap, like where the town doesn't currently have capacity to make the connection to the Attorney General program, that the trust could take that on?
one step a little bit before that, my suggestion is compiling a list through a spreadsheet, let's say, of addresses listing the owner, the contact information, the condition, the status, the delinquency. And only when we have that, and so some of these may be tax title projects. Some of these may be building or health code violations. Some of these may be simply abandoned houses. Once we have that information, the trust is not in the position to talk to the Attorney General and provide those projects. The trust would work with our nonprofit partners, such as Habitat or such as Construct, to say, to bring them in and say, here's a candidate, here's what we know about it. So, as I said, a catalyst to get them involved.
Yeah, I was just needing to understand, like, if we're a catalyst to what, and now I got it.
Informational. We would, our role would be informational.
And both Construct and Habitat already do this.
They are both approved to do this, and they both have successfully done projects such as this. I do not know that CDC has entered into these projects.
Well, and they don't have an executive director yet, right?
I believe Mr. Ornstein is still serving as the interim.
Just how they got where they were. Okay, so
So
in terms of in terms of the shape of the proposal for the CPC application, that project would not need to be included in any financial projections for FY26.
yeah, unless you want to pay me an honorarium. No, kidding. There
And
is no
and,
financial impact.
and in terms of when we get involved in a property that's in foreclosure, from a budgeting perspective, what do we need to think about for that?
Well, as Chris mentioned, we have successfully done one project on 40 Grove Street where the town, through town meeting, gave us control of the project. We then, acting as the town's agent, put an RFP out. We got a couple of responses. We chose Habitat as the developer. They paid us $1 for the project. We did not then also give them additional funds for the project, other than the person that was sold to did receive a down payment assistance loan. So no, so the answer to your question, the very long answer to your question is no, there would be no financial impact to that.
Great.
We would be basically doing the legwork of the town to get it back on the tax rolls.
Any other things that we've been talking about that we might need to or want to include in the CPC proposal?
Well, yes, we, as we talked about last time, our open RFP to any developer sunsetted at the end of the fiscal year and has not been renewed. We did at that time say that we may in the future want to reopen that, because the whole idea when we talked about the RFP before was we don't always know what programs are going to work. So the idea of a open call, if you will, is somebody may have a good idea, somebody may have a great plan, and they are looking for a mechanism to bring it forward. The second thing I'll say is when we're talking about the CPA application, we're talking about funds that we would be spending likely 18 months, 20 months from now. The lead time is one of those things that's, you know,
Yeah.
even though we're talking to them now in August and in October, they would be making a recommendation for town meeting, which would likely be in the spring, and the funds wouldn't be available to us till a year from now in July. And,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't necessarily even be spending those monies until, say, 6 months later, 9 months later. So this is a very long way of saying we may have an ADU follow-on program in fiscal 26. The pilot
Yeah.
program maybe go through 25. Having learned a few things about that, we may choose to fund it.
Yeah, and I think that we can, in the structure of the proposal, especially now that we've talked to them more than once in this year about each activity we're doing as a body, I think that we can give them the process that it will be in this year that we use the data from the ADU pilot to finalize what the ADU program will really look like going through into the following year. But here's how we'd like to budget for it.
Yeah, sometimes I think even the CPA committee forgets how long a lead time some of these programs have.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think, you know,
For
in-
us, for us,
Well-
it's operating money. It's our operating funds, but it's our operating funds that we're not gonna be expending for 20 months.
Yeah.
You know,
but I do think that we can take, you know, in both the situation with the ADU and also with the the open request for proposals to developers, we have a lot of time this year that we won't be reviewing proposals. And so we could go into July 1, 2025, ready to open an RFP and ready to open whatever that ADU program 2.0 looks like. And I would suggest that that's the way we do it rather than, you know, we'll get the money that July and we won't be ready to do anything with it until December or January.
understood. My only point is we need to make the argument or at least satisfy the CPA committee.
Yeah.
Now that we have or will have a program, even if we haven't worked out all of the details of that program, they still need to understand that we will, by the time we put the program out on the street, those details will be worked out.
Yeah.
In the past, they've been hesitant about that. I see Chris has his hand up.
I'm just going to have to take my leave and thank the trust. I know sometimes your work seems slow, but hey, you haven't been around that long. You've already done an incredible amount of work, so keep it up.
Thanks,
And
Chris.
look forward to talking to Ananda tomorrow about CPA reporting.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Chris. Have a good night. With that is a good reminder that it is 12 minutes to 8. So I feel set on with what I've heard around the CPA application process. I don't think Fred's computer crashed, so I'm now running the meeting. Are folks still here? You are comfortable with us moving forward in the direction as we discussed?
Yes.
Aye.
Great. Christina, does that work for you?
I am curious what we're going to be doing at whole year with no money.
Well, we have some money and we have work to do to be ready to spend the money that we hope to get a year from now. That leaves us with Fred sent around the new AMI limits. Is any discussion people would like to have about that? I'm sorry, I don't have them pulled up to share on my screen. Also, the font was really small.
I updated the website with that information too.
Yep.
I would simply want to note for the record that they're completely miscalculated for Great Barrington, but that's my discussion.
This is the second homeowners.
Yep. But I don't think HUD will be watching this video, so I'm not sure it's worth going into it any more than that.
I mean, you can send it to them. You never know.
I'll send them links to articles on the Edge that I've read about this.
There you go. Fred also has under new business developing a handbook for the trust. I think we'll just, people are amenable, we'll skip that. And Joe, did you want to say anything on that?
No, that was a thumbs up.
Got it.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's new business.
Yeah.
This is all new to me, obviously, or if it should come under trustee speak. But I don't know what qualifies for new business. Does new business have to be on the agenda?
So yes, for under open meeting law, everything has to be on the agenda So let's put your item under trustee speak, and would you like to start trustee speak time?
Okay. So a couple of items for trustee speak. Section 11 of the town zoning bylaw has a definition for movable tiny house. And if you are to look at the market for which is connected to electricity, water, sewer, septic, it has a chassis, wheels, and shall be considered an accessory dwelling unit. The definition of movable tiny house at D of section 11 under that definition says it shall not be more than 400 square feet of habitable living space, excluding lofts. When you research movable tiny houses on the internet, as one does, you'll see that if you will, the definition of movable tiny house has actually been stretched to 500 square feet rather than the town's definition of 400 square feet. So there's a much more livable, desirable, and now larger market for movable tiny houses at 500 square feet. And if we want to make housing affordable, and I think we do since that's in our name, then perhaps it's time to consider enabling movable tiny houses that are a little less tiny. And so for trustee speak, I would ask, seek the other trustees' input, whether we could ask that the town's bylaw directing the planning board to consider that there's currently a disconnect between our current bylaw and the emerging market. And so my ask is whether we could request the planning board consider an amendment to the zoning bylaw to change the definition of movable tiny house to be not more than 500 square feet.
So yeah, we had a similar conversation like two or three sessions ago, and it was I approached it from the point of mobile homes, and the mobile homes are defined as 600 square feet, I think. But basically what I was arguing is that or maybe they're 500 feet, but what I was arguing was that essentially that the tiny homes are sort of arbitrarily distinguished from the mobile homes. So that's like, anyways, we drafted a letter to the planning board that was specifically asking them to allow mobile homes, and so to take it even like a step further, and yeah, so I'm in support of I guess expanding the definition of movable tiny homes, but I wanted to go even further.
Process wise, why don't we do this? Process wise, why don't we put an item on the agenda for the next meeting?
Yeah.
And to not slow down the conversation, why don't we assume that if we were acting on it, we'd act on it in a similar pattern. So if someone were to come to that agenda item with a drafted letter, we could we could address all of that in August.
Yeah.
So regarding movable tiny homes, Joseph, do you perceive this as all one letter, or would you like to perceive this as two separate letters, one relating to mobile housing and one related to movable tiny housing?
Yeah, so I think we should have the conversation next time, but basically I think it would come across to them as us coming back, which is I think totally appropriate because we had a good reception from them about mobile homes. Sorry?
I never heard about the report about what was the response.
So basically just very quickly, the bylaws very strictly forbid mobile homes, and then they allow movable tiny homes. And so we went to them and said, is this really necessary anymore? Can we open up and allow mobile homes in more cases? And so I think and they said they were amenable to it, but it was also they were also planning for budget. So so now would be a good time to come back and say, hey, we'd like to talk to you again about it. And in addition, we're thinking maybe even movable tiny homes are too strict. So yeah, I think it's fine.
Sounds good.
So
it
as
would
a
be-
package.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be good as a package, and on the one hand, it's follow-up, and on the other hand, and we'd like to also talk about this.
So is there a letter that's been in the works or has been drafted?
Yes, I can email that.
Yeah, Joe, you want to share that with Peter?
And then would it be appropriate for me to add some additional language concerning the expansion of the definition of a movable tiny home to be 500 square feet? Yes?
Yes, but well, I'll send you the links because it's like we had a whole conversation at planning board that you could review, and then we can just letter.
Why don't you two connect between meetings so that Peter can get the full details from you, Joe?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I feel like this is a situation where what you all come to us with in August, once you guys have connected, it will serve the discussion we need to have.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other trustees for trustee speak?
I just want to say I'm sorry about that. My computer crashed. It's fine all the rest of the month. It's just I try to open a whole lot of windows and tabs, and it just doesn't like that. So I guess it's time for a new computer.
Yep.
I have one more item for trustee speak, just something I want to get off my chest.
Yeah.
Which relates to housing, which is that in most states, you do not need attorneys to close a house sale. And as reported recently in a New York Times article, closing costs have jumped dramatically, in already making it difficult. And I don't believe this trust can affect Massachusetts law, but if it could, we should consider that escrow agents and not attorneys should be utilized for the closing of sales. Now I've spoken.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bill, did you just unmute for a second?
I was agreeing with Peter, that's all.
Christina or Joe,
Yep.
do you have anything to add for trustee speak?
No, thanks.
And there's no audience. There's no.
There's
and
no
there's
citizens present besides us. There's no media present besides us. So what is it that Steve says when he adjourns meetings at the end?
Without objection.
Without objection. We will adjourn.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.